The biggest battle we will ever have to face is the battle between you and you. It's the battle of taking your mind to that limit and then breaking through. On the Mindful Experiment podcast, we will share concepts, universal laws, and interviewing individuals who have done just that, who have gone through the dark times and through those moments allowed their light to shine bright. I'm your host, Dr. Vic Manzo, and I want to thank you for listening to the podcast and taking this journey with me as we discover different avenues to break through those limits, expand your reality, and evolve into the person you desire to be. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. This podcast is sponsored by Empower Your Reality. It's an online university and also a one-on-one and group coaching business that's there to help enlighten, to raise the consciousness, and help the individual truly thrive in every area of their life. We have a new online class that is now available called Life Mastery. And what this 5-week course is all about is teaching you the rules of life, how to create life mastery in your life, how to become the master of your life to thrive and create all that you desire. In this 5-week course, we dive deep into spiritual laws, universal laws, quantum physics, neurology, functional neurology, to back up all the concepts that we bring to the table to give you a platform to utilize and to really help grow and expand. Right now, we have a ton of amazing bonuses that are going on while you sign up for the class, and we even offer a 2-week money-back guarantee if you don't like the program. To check out more about it, go to www.empoweryourreality.com. Now, back to the show. Hey everybody, this is Dr. Vic, and you're listening to another amazing episode here on the Mindful Experiment. As each week on Fridays, we get the chance to interview someone to share some insight, some wisdom to help you elevate what they're up to, how they're sharing their light with the world, and so much more. In this interview, I got an amazing opportunity to interview Mike Smerklo. And this was a good interview in it, from a standpoint of he shared some wonderful, straightforward wisdom. He talks about the monkey that we all have in our minds. I love how he shared it as being a monkey. There's a lot of power behind that. But he talks about this inner battle. He wrote this book and about the whole monkey aspect and how the monkey in me, Mr. Monkey in Me, as it's called, how to really, the monkey is always changing and it's smart and it's always learning and evolving like you are. And it's one of the things we always have to face and deal with. Talk a little bit about Mike. Mike is an experienced entrepreneur, investor, and business leader driven by the desire to turn ideas into reality. Having bought and scaled a small business into a publicly traded company worth nearly $1 billion in value, he has a deep understanding of the hard work, dedication, and grit that truly powers successful entrepreneurship. Today, as the co-founder and managing director of Next Coast Ventures, Smerklo is a champion for a new generation of entrepreneurs building disruptive companies in big markets. His new book, Mr. Monkey and Me, by Scribe Media, came out this year, November 17th, 2020, is a real talk guide for entrepreneurs who want to cut through the noise to cultivate a mindset that supports greatness. To talk a little bit about his history and his story, he gets into it in the podcast, but Mike grew up in a blue-collar family outside of Toledo, Ohio, with dreams of achieving something more with his life. After working his way through college to earn an accounting degree and moving to Chicago to land his CPA career, he eventually talked his way into a junior analysis gig with the Wall Street investment bank, Lehman Brothers. While he hated the job, surviving 2 years of hellish 100-hour work weeks and countless spreadsheets, Mike had a solid understanding of finance and a company building. He went on to earn an MBA from Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University and experienced Silicon Valley.com boom as an investment banker at Morgan Stanley. Mike was recruited by legendary entrepreneurs Mark Andreessen, and Ben Horowitz as one of the first employees of the new startup LoudCloud. Here, he learned from the very best about what it takes to grow a company from an idea through an initial public offering. And then Mike started his own entrepreneurship journey in 2003, purchasing Service Source, a 30-person technology service startup in San Francisco. As CEO for the next 12 years, he grew that into a business into a successful 30,000-person publicly traded company with close to $300 million in revenue. Mike has done amazing things. He is a guy who talks the talk and walks the walk. You're going to hear that in the podcast. We talk about the book and so many other things. So I'm not going to take any more away from Mike here. Here is Mike Smerklo. Well, Mike, welcome to the show.
Vic, it's great to be here.
I'm excited to have you on. I love the title of your book, Mr. Monkey and Me. I know you have a lot of great stuff to discuss on mindset and entrepreneurship and all this stuff. So thanks for taking the time. Thanks for taking the space, sharing space with me to create this wonderful episode that we're going to be having for the listeners here.
It's great to be here. Thanks again for having me.
So I always like asking this question, and we were just talking about this, and every time I interview someone, I always like to ask your story. How'd you get into where you are? And I do this because, again, for the listeners, they know that I always share that, life is not really this straight line most of the time. It's more of this like pinball bounce around effect. And so I love when I interview people, because this is the question I always like to start off with, is how did you get into what you're doing today? What was the journey to get here?
Yeah, well, it's I love the pinball description because that's very apt for my career, and also dumb luck luck and serendipity has played a role too. I always like to call that out. But the medium story is I was the first person in my family to ever go to college. I talk about in this book, I grew up in a very impoverished situation where most of my role models were suffering from disease, divorce, a lot of alcoholism, not a lot of great role models. So early on, I just wanted to get out of Toledo, Ohio, where I grew up. And I was able to just get into college. I studied business in college, and my first job was a CPA. I studied accounting because I thought that would be a good way to learn business. And my very first job, it was one of those jobs that 36 hours into it, I think I realized, oh, blank, what have I done here? I've ended up in accounting, but it was a good framework for me. I learned business. I did that for a couple of years. Then I went and worked on Wall Street for a couple of years. And then I went to business school at Northwestern. And then I moved out to Silicon Valley in the late 90s. And I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. It was kind of my goal in life. And so there was no better time than in the late 90s in technology, watching just a really magical time. By serendipity, I got to go work for two amazing entrepreneurs, a gentleman named Ben Horowitz and Mark Andreessen. They become more famous now because they've got a great venture capital firm. Ben's written a couple of books, which I highly recommend for anyone thinking about entrepreneurship. But anyways, I worked for them for 2 years. The company went from zero through IPO, and then I quit. I wanted to go run my own thing, so I raised a small pool of capital to look for a company to buy. Again, luck prevailed. I found a great business in downtown San Francisco. I bought the business with other people's money, so I raised some capital from outside sources. And then I ran that business for almost 13 years and took it from a small startup all the way through a publicly traded company. I ran it as a public company CEO for 3.5 years. And then I retired. Quit, retired, fired, all kind of the same thing melded together. I became chairman of that company. And then I started a venture capital firm, which I do today. So I now co-manage a firm called Next Coast Ventures in Austin, Texas. And I've been doing that for the last 5 years. We've raised almost $250 million, and I've invested in over 50 different startups over the last 5 years.
That's amazing. And what a pinball effect you have gone through.
Yeah, that's why I said I love when you said that. I was like, oh, I love that term. And I think, that's part of the fabric of life that makes it interesting for me.
Gotcha. And was there, going through that, to where you are at the moment, and all that you do, was it like, did you have any questions in your mind? Was frustrations that you went through, or was it just like, okay, this is it, I'm moving over here. All right, that's it, and I'm going to go over here. How was that journey from that perspective?
Yeah, no, it's so funny. If you put that on the spectrum, I would say it's like frustration the whole time. And I talk about this in the book. There's an old, I forget the comedian's name, but he used to do this. You might be a redneck if. Was it Jeff Foxworthy, I think? I joke about it. It's like, you might be an entrepreneur if you're, and one of the features is you're kind of frustrated and you always feel in your mind, maybe there's something more, or you could be doing something different. And I've been both plagued and blessed by that, I guess is the way I describe it. Early on, I felt like I wanted to do more, have more contribution. And that was sometimes a negative emotion, but it really positively fueled me to try different things. And more than a couple of times when I switched from accounting, when I went to work for Mark and Ben at a company called Opsware, became LoudCloud, became Opsware. And then when I started my venture capital firm, 3 different times I had to take a step back in my career when the logical step was, just progress forward. I actually went backwards in 3 different times on purpose. But there was a lot of frustration and, what have I done? Maybe 4 times. But it really served me well in rounding out my experience and getting me to where I am today.
I love that. That is so awesome. And how important is it for? I love to dive into this conversation a little bit. How important is it for mindset when it comes to these types of things? And we can talk about this in an entrepreneurial standpoint. We can talk about it just from your own journey, both, whatever, wherever you want that to go. But how important is it the mindset to play a role in all that?
Well, I mean, it's funny because I've been looking at this from my own life, and then now when I invest in entrepreneurs, and maybe it's just broad, I think it's broader in life, but trying to figure out, there's multiple keys to success, and I'm not an expert on that. But the one thing that struck me is I see all the time great companies that have all the same resources, and one wins and one doesn't. It's kind of the impetus writing the book, but I came down to mindset, and I really do think that all things being equal, the mindset can be the critical difference between success and failure. And in the book, I talk about it. The star of the book isn't me, it's this monkey, which is my caricature or my manifestation of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And how overcoming that and really coming to grips with it can be the critical difference between success and failure. Again, all things being equal.
Very interesting. And when you're saying so doubt, you had doubt in that perspective, and that's one of the big factors that played a role in it all.
Yeah, I was plagued, still am. My joke is, I feel like the monkey right before we started the podcast, the monkey, ran out of my office and said, "Hey, no one's going to listen to this." Not because of Vic, because of you, Mike. So the monkey is always there, and I came to realize now that it's just a voice. It's something you have to learn to address. But the number of times, I think the key was for me to start to personify this voice and start to address it, because heck, I've been plagued by it. Every time when you're at that, should I quit? There's going to be a voice, or should I start? Should I keep going? Should I quit? All these different phases of anything you do in your life, at least for me, and I think pretty much for everybody, there's a voice that says, yeah, you should quit. You should give up. And I think the voice is the tricky part is it can sound like a lot of different people in your life. The voice can change, and it can say different things to different people, but it's going to be something nagging telling you that you're not going to achieve your goals. And, that can be debilitating.
I love how I forgot to mention this, that you call it a monkey because you gave it something, and you made it yours. You gave it, I don't want to say a personality, could be a personality, but you kind of coined it that way. Like I used to say, here goes stinking thinking is what I used to call it. I didn't call it a monkey. I wish I did. I think that's pretty cool. I used to say, here comes stinking thinking. All right, what do you got to say now? Let me listen. Let me hear what you have to say. But I think it's one of the things where, that inner critic, that inner battle. Yeah, and that's that's what the monkey is, correct?
That's what the monkey is. And listen, I'm not a motivational speaker. I don't do this as a day job, so I'm not want to be one of those, just think great thoughts. More, it's trying to get to what is the monkey telling you? What does that voice say? Because I think the weird thing is, there's this positive self-esteem movement that says just think positive thoughts. I'm not there. What I'm more of the mindset that says there is a voice in your head telling you something. That voice actually may have some very real points. And it may be something you should listen to, but just don't become enslaved by it. That to me is the key message that I'm trying to get across, certainly for entrepreneurs, wherever they are in their journey.
I agree 100% with you too, because, sometimes in the motivational world, they're always like about that. And it's like, hey, grass is great, but there's weeds there too. Don't ignore them and know how to work with them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And sometimes the weeds can be a sign of something. But mine, the funny part for me was, and I tell these stories in the book, it's like I just had to personify it because I'm going to give my first talk. I bought this small company and I'm walking in and I'm walking over to the place that we had rented to give the opening speech. And literally I have these thoughts in my head, like, what are you doing? And it's imposter syndrome. You're not worthy. You don't know what you're doing. You've never run anything before. And I tell the story of like, it was like a monkey was like jumping up in front of me. And I had to say, okay, appreciate that, appreciate what you're telling me, and then turning that into motivation and letting it help motivate me to do a great job. That's a good thing. But had I just completely succumbed to the thing, I would have gotten up and stumbled all over my words and not motivated anybody.
Oh, that's so true. I love that because there's a quote that I love and I live by it. It's from Lao Tzu, the creator of I Ching. I always mess that up. But long story short, he talks about how to master others is strength, but to master yourself is true power. And I think that's what we're talking about with the monkey. When you know how to master it, it's going to keep talking. It's still going to do that. And I think one of the things I like to use. You ever watch the movie The Beautiful Mind?
Absolutely love that movie.
I think this is one of the things. Would you agree then that the monkey, right, is huge in the beginning of life, and as you keep working with it, and so forth, it never goes away, but it just gets smaller?
Well, it's interesting, Vic. I actually don't think that, so. It's a great debate, and I think there's no right answer on it. But in my mind, the monkey keeps getting different. And so, an example I would use is early on. I thought if I achieve, again, come dirt poor, no one else around is educated. So I'm thinking my first job, if I get to this, then everything will be better. And then I'm an entrepreneur, and I think, well, if I achieve this, then that'll put this monkey aside. What I found is A, that isn't true, and B, the monkey's voice kind of changed. And so I'm writing a book, and now the monkey's saying, what do you know about writing a book, right? So I think that the point is, at least for me, he kind of gets craftier and different and more subtle than the voice that I had when I was younger, but it's still there. And I think through some self-mastery and appreciation and meditation and therapy, the voice has probably gotten a little bit smaller, but it's still there for me.
I like how you put it that way because it is true. It does change. Like I remember studying like a Warren Buffett and these other guys, and I was like, my old programming was they're billionaires. They got no money issues. They're fine. They're set for life. Their great grandkids are set for life. And then I started studying their life, and I started to see that no, they still do. It's just different.
Yep.
It's just the different challenges and stuff. And so I love when you were bringing that up. That's exactly what I was thinking of.
Yeah, and I think that as you progress through your life, wherever stage your life is, appreciating. I see so many people as they get in the middle age, and I think they start to give up, and I'm never going to do this, never do that. I mean, it's interesting because I'm in that category now, but I watch some people start to give up, and I think a lot of it's because comparison. I love this quote. Comparison is the thief of joy, because when you start to compare yourself to other people and look at I'm not that person, I haven't done that, then you just start to give up. And that's the monkey winning.
So true in so many ways. So how can then people, like, for example, let's say for an entrepreneur who's started out, or and so forth, or they've been in business for quite some time and they're looking to level up in some way, shape, or form, how can people gain courage, stamina, motivation, inspiration, whatever the word may be, to pursue, how to achieve a certain idea, a certain level they want to get to, but more importantly, then stay there?
Yeah. So, and I think to stay there is equally as important. Just stepping back a little bit, the reason I wrote the book to answer your question a little more along the way, I wrote the book because I got sick of the content I saw for entrepreneurs, and it kind of fell into two categories. It fell into the kind of the hack category. If you know this type of genre, it's usually short blog posts, and it'll say, here's the 5 things that Jeff Bezos does every day before 5 a.m. Well, Jeff Bezos is the richest man in the world. It really doesn't help you and I as we're starting our small business or on our entrepreneur journey. So there's that category. And to me, that's like eating junk food when you're really hungry. Doesn't really satisfy your appetite, makes you feel disgusted afterwards, and probably feel like, well, I don't do that before 5 a.m. You can delete out that bad word, sorry. And then the other category of content was really very tactical. Here's how to write a business plan. Here's how to form a corporation. But nothing really talked to what you're getting at, which is, how do I get the right mental framework to continue to get started, to keep going, and if I'm successful, to not completely screw up. So that's why I wrote the book. And then what I wanted to do, rather than just have a bunch of lofty words, I really broke it down into a 5-letter acronym, and then tried to give practical, specific advice at the end of each chapter. So I came up with a SHAPE formula, largely based on what I saw from myself, what I'd done wrong, and then what I'd really, more importantly, seen from either my time at working for guys like Ben Horowitz and Mark Andreessen, or now as an entrepreneur or as an investor, what I've seen the attributes that great entrepreneurs do, and brought that together in a formula.
Now, a word from our sponsor. With the new year, it's an excellent time for fresh perspective in your life. Are you really following your happiness and most fulfilled path? I came across a service from trulydivine.com. They offer an in-depth astrology and numerology birth chart and relationship readings. Really in-depth, easy to understand, and a shockingly accurate reading into my personality traits and life, around 65 pages. Combining astrology and numerology can give you a highly accurate composite view of your personality and life direction, including your uniqueness, strengths, challenges, and emotional triggers. I would highly recommend their services to anyone interested in learning more about themselves or others in their life. You can also use the discount code MINDFUL for 25% off. Trust me, you'll be amazed. Learn more details on their services at trulydivine.com. I love that. And I think that's very critical to have in so many ways, as you already know this, to help them get through that and push through that. How much does, again, just coming back to that mindset side, how much does that help with the whole idea of pushing forth with that, with the formula and everything else to get to that area, to get to that level, and then stay on track too? Any cues or tips or tricks or anything like that?
Yeah, well, I think, first of all, when it comes to business, you still have to have a good idea. I don't want to, when I talk about this, I sometimes fail to mention that, hey, if you have a really bad idea, mindset may not help. And so I want to make sure that's understood. Secondarily, I think there's way too much glorification around entrepreneurship. It's hard. That's my key message. It's going to be hard, so expect it. But then really the formula, which is SHAPE, which stands for self-awareness, H is for help, A is for authenticity, P is for persistence, and E is for expectations, again, tries to give really specific tips for each one of those. I don't know if you're ever going to master it. I certainly haven't, but just things like I found very practically meditation really helped me with being authentic, having expectations that there was no going to be perfect day, things like that I bring forward. And then also areas where forums are the where you can get some help. I tried to bring those together very specific so that the reader can say, okay, that's something I can act upon versus a lofty topic that sounds great but really hard to implement.
I like that. And how much, so do you practice meditation daily?
I do. I start, I joke, I apologize to all the people that used to work for me, because certainly early on in my career, I was, admittedly, I was short-tempered. I was very aggressive and at times lashed out at those that worked for me. And I'm embarrassed by that, but it happened. But I really found, certainly today, if I don't start my day in a pragmatic way, today I got up at 5:30, I meditate for 15, 20 minutes, then I work out, then I begin my day. Every day that I do that, I'm just in a much better mental framework. And when I don't do that, I notice everything's kind of off. So I try and do that as regularly as I can.
And how long have you been meditating for?
Probably about 6 years.
Awesome. What is the biggest, and I'm just curious because we talk a lot about meditation in on the podcast and also in my own coaching and all this other stuff I do. What was I going to ask now? What is the biggest thing that you said it just keeps you on your game and it keeps you more centered is the biggest thing probably then?
Yeah, it does two things for me. Well, multiple things for me. And certainly I don't do it every day. I wish the times I don't, for whatever reason, life happens. But I think for me, it does two things. One, it's just a centering way to begin the day. Okay, and for me, it's more around what I want to accomplish, how do I want to show up in the world. And then the second thing it does, which I notice as a secondary benefit, not an obvious one, was just by doing some breathing. I do a little bit of breathing around my meditation. Later on in the day, because I always find it's funny, right? You set up your day, here's what I want to do, and then traffic or kids, whatever, something happens, right? Life happens. So how do you stay in the mindset? And I'm certainly not perfect at this, but I just find that I'm able to take a deep breath and usually stay a little more centered. So that's a secondary benefit for me.
I love it. Yeah, and the cool thing is I've been meditating for about 14 years now. 14? Yeah, roughly. And it's one of the things where it's funny how less reactive we are and more centered we are but also more focus and more clarity we have in our day and our life and what we do.
Yeah, I mean, how did you start, Vic? What was the impetus for you to be in meditating?
Great question. For me, I was going into chiropractic school, and while I was in chiropractic school, I was studying energy medicine because I want to understand like the depth of healing, the fabric of healing, and how the body works and all this stuff. And for some reason, I was being pulled that way. And it was just a matter of when I started my spiritual teacher, she talked about meditation and how to just calm and center the mind, and how it'll have benefits and effects for me from a neurological standpoint, which I needed to know that because at that time I was going through chiropractic school. I'm learning about the brain. So I was like, I need stuff that connects. I just don't take one way. I want to see how it plays on all areas of life. And it was just from that moment. So I started practicing meditation. I didn't do it daily. I should have did it daily back then. I didn't. But I was practicing it here and there. And I just started dabbing into it from time to time. And it was just this beautiful, I started getting into this like beautiful bliss state when I would go into some of them. And I was just like, this is awesome. My stress is decreased. I could see things from a different perspective. And from that moment, that's what kind of inspired me to be like, I'm going to continue practicing this. And then, of course, as I studied entrepreneurs and millionaires and billionaires, I wanted to know, I was like looking for the clues of success. And I found out a lot of them had a morning ritual of some sort. And one of them, and 80-something% of them had meditation involved.
Yeah.
And so that was like more fuel to the fire where I was like, okay, I got to do this more often. And so I've been practicing that since, and I've been meditating now. I did 3.5 years straight every day. And then I started messing up this summer and I was like, son of a gun, 3.5 years. I've been doing it every day. But it's okay. Start back and I'm like, all right, just get back on the wheel. Or, it's like falling off a bike. All right, get back on the bike and I'll continue to do every day again and just continue to move forward.
Yeah, it's staggering. It's a great story. It's staggering for me because I stumbled across it similar. I mean, it might have been like Tim Ferriss or something 7 or 8 years ago or something like similar. Yeah, similar assessment that the morning routine, how prominent it is for really successful people. So I tried it as well, and I've come to, I've got 4 children, and I started talking to them about it because I really think it's like, why isn't this taught in schools? I mean, it's such an obvious thing that you say mental, the physical, all the spiritual, all these aspects come out of it. And I'm kind of staggering that it's not more widespread for young people.
Well, like the Dalai Lama said, he said that if we can teach the children, 8-year-olds today, how to meditate, within one generation, we can decrease or even end, violence or I think it was violence in the world because of what it does. And of course, I love hearing quotes like that, but I'm more of this like why guy. So I'm like, all right, that's great, cool, but why? Where are the cues that tells us that? And so my background in chiropractic has really helped me out a lot because I understand the brain very well. And I'm like, well, that makes sense. Meditation builds up the prefrontal cortex. When you build up the prefrontal cortex, you're more human in a sense. That's how I call it. But it's just you have more human attributes. You don't react as much. You're more centered. You actually feel a certain way or think a certain way. And what ends up happening is you can project to see how that's going to affect your life and others. And you become more compassionate for others rather than where most people are right now is the amygdala part of the brain, which is the stress, fear, worry, anxiety, impulse behavior, just being reactive in many states where this is where you look at where we are in the world, especially with COVID come around and lockdowns and all these other things. You see a lot more of that.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Wow, that's really, really cool.
Yeah. So meditation, that's why I'm always curious because I just, as we interview more people, they're always talking about, I meditate. This is one thing that's been the biggest thing for me. And it's something I try to advocate on the podcast. And then with people I work with, I'm always like, meditation is a huge thing that can massively help change your life. And I know you're one that has experienced that also.
Yeah, I as I said earlier, I just wish I would have done it when I was an entrepreneur, when I was a CEO, because I think I might have broken as much glass as I did.
I wish I did it when I was a teenager. I would have had less anger, less frustration, and I would have been a lot happier. I mean, I was a happy kid from the outside, but not in the inside. And I wish I knew it back then. But it's life, right? You learn as you go.
Yep. Hopefully that's the goal.
And I think that's kind of like an entrepreneurial way too, right? Because you learn. I always I share this a lot too with when it comes like that. I'm not going to get into the whole education system, but I talk about how life works, and life is all about. You go do something and then you learn from that. Where school is, you learn and then you go get tested. I'm sorry, you take the test with life and then you learn what you made mistakes on and how to grow to get better. Where a school system is, you learn something and then you go take the test.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurship, where is that at?
Well, that's a great lead in, because one of the things I find in terms of the, leading into like what the mental mindset, but I think sometimes entrepreneurs, and even if you're running and I want to write the book for someone who's running a small business all the way up to large business, but I think one of the misconceptions I made certainly was that I had to know it all. And it kind of leads to that, what you're talking about, education and how you learn and grow and evolve. But early on in my career, I thought I need to know everything. I'm the boss, right? I run the place. So that must mean that I have all the answers. And it really was early on that I got, and it's why the H came into this, was one of a legendary coaches, business coaches in Silicon Valley, a guy named Bill Campbell, who died a few years ago. This guy was the go-to coach for Steve Jobs at Apple, the founders of Google, and founders of Twitter. I mean, he was a legend, and I happened to fortunately know him. But I remember one time early in my career, I was just frustrated. I was having trouble with a certain role, hiring a head of sales, and had messed it up a couple of times and felt like my board was getting ready to fire me. And I went to see him and have a beer at a bar down in Palo Alto, California when I was living there. And I sat down with Bill, and this guy's an old football coach, gruff guy, old school football coach guy, turned business executive. And he used a bunch of expletives while trying to avoid, but he said, Smerklo, why don't you have a coach? I said, well, what do you mean I have a coach? I don't have time for a coach. I got all this other stuff to do. And he's like, well, Steve Jobs has a coach. Tiger Woods has a coach. Why wouldn't you have someone helping you with the problems you're facing? And it was a really interesting, to your point, in education, because I never thought of it. It's like, well, gosh, so it's okay if I don't know everything? It's okay if I don't have all the answers? And he's like, well, heck yeah, no one does. And so that really was to your point around how you learn and how you evolve. What really taught me was, once everything you want to do, someone somewhere has already done it. But secondarily, it's okay not to have all the answers. And third, you actually show up as a better leader when you kind of admit that. So I learned this, not superpower, but going to even to my team and saying, I don't know the answer to that. Where can we find out more? Really changed how I showed up as a leader, and I think helped me be more successful as an entrepreneur. So that's an interesting, maybe perhaps tangent, but I think to your point around getting, educating, learning, and evolving, it's absolutely critical for entrepreneurship. But I think a lot of people feel like it's just the opposite, which is a real trap.
Yeah, and I fell in that trap, and it was like thinking the same thing. I need to know everything. When I started my chiropractic business, it was like, I'm the doctor. I have to make sure that I know everything that they're coming with. I want to make sure I'm knowledgeable as much as I can be. And then there came a point where I was just like, you know what? There's sometimes I'm not going to know everything, and that's okay. But I'm not. But then I started to use the framework of like, but I can always find out. I'll figure it out. I'll be able to help. Or I have, and I have a coach help me in other ways too, to make sure that I'm being the best person I can be for my patients. And then also in the mindset world and all that. And I think it's critical. And you bring this up, and I've had people bring this up before about the importance of having a coach. And it's one of the things where they pick out your blind spots, don't they?
Yeah, they really do. And I mean, what you just described as a doctor, which I think is it's kind of a growth mindset. It's great for everything, but it really starts with self-awareness and kind of knowing that, to your point, when you're thinking about doctor, the self-awareness and maybe self-confidence, but self-awareness, say, I don't know everything. And where are the areas that I need to expand my skill set or my knowledge base, and then go seek it. If you can take that lens on life, certainly with business, I think the chances of success go up dramatically.
And you mentioned something like the growth mindset, which I think is hugely critical in how to get to that success too, because it's like, I always kind of explain it like if you have a fixed mindset, or you do think you know it all, right? And a lot of my opening to this came from studying like spiritual laws and universal laws and all that, and like quantum physics, and like looking at how much do you really know of all the information that exists in the world. If you want to be humbled, that will humble you so quick. And so from that moment, when I really looked at the numbers and looked at the science of all the vast information that's out there, and then how much can the mind only comprehend and take, I was like, okay, never going to know much of anything ever again. I barely know anything as it is. I know enough, but I'm like, wow, there's so much out there. And so it's like, it's one of those things where, for me at least, it was very humbling to know, like, I only know 0.000 some percent of the vast of information that exists.
Yeah, that is a humbling perspective, but a healthy one if you think about it the right way.
Exactly. I do have one question for you because you've helped scale some businesses, and I'm curious to know, like, how you bought and you scaled one of the businesses to become almost $1 billion in value. That's awesome. How I've heard this a lot in topics about businesses. You got to make sure how to scale and how to get to certain levels. Is there I want to say mindset, but is there is there different perspectives or different mindsets in scaling and in growth when it comes to a business and looking at it to how to scale properly?
Yeah, it's one of those terms when you say that, when you say, hey, you need to scale the business, it's a little bit like someone telling you, hey, you should take care of your body. You're like, well, how? What should I do? And I think that I'll answer the question, but one of the most interesting things I've found moving from being an entrepreneur to now an investor is there's no one size fit all. I actually had this belief that there was certain attributes of entrepreneurs that were universal successful entrepreneurs, and it's simply not true. There's extroverts, there's introverts, there's technical, non-technical folks. But I think therein lies the answer to your question. What I think is a critical aspect for scaling any business is for the leader or entrepreneur to understand where he or she is really good and where they need to supplement their skills. Because I think the number one mistake that people make, again, back to this, I need to know everything or I need to be great at everything, it's a real risk. And where businesses scale is by bringing in functional leaders that are as good or better than when I finally figured it out, I was like, wait a minute, I need to get someone who's much, much better at marketing and sales and finance and go on down the list. That's when the business really started to scale. Early on, I kind of felt like, well, again, back to this imposter syndrome or entrepreneur mindset, like I need to know everything or be good at everything. That was a limiting belief. And so the more, I think, to answer your question, I think the best way to think about scale is, what are you good at? What are you not good at? And what does the business need? If you can do those two simple exercises, real simple graph, even starting off, what are you as a leader good at? What are you not good at? What do you like to do, not like to do? And then compare that to where the 5 things that are really going to drive the business to the next level. Those two simple exercises can be incredibly powerful. And so you may say, I'm in my medical practice, I need to do X, Y, and Z. I don't like to do Z. All right, so I can go hire someone to do Z for me, and that can make all the difference in scale. Again, very simple exercise, but often overlooked when businesses are just getting going or really starting to hit that critical inflection point.
And that would be just delegating things you don't like to do, right?
It's
in a different frame.
Yeah, I think it's a little more than that. I mean, there certainly is that delegation, but I think it's just being, if you can lay out the 5 things, 5's an arbitrary number, but the 4 or 5 things that you need to do to take your business to the next level, and then really be critical around, do we, either me as the leader or the organization, do we have the right person to achieve those things? And again, it seems really simple, but it's not just delegation, but if your business isn't getting as many customers as you want, and therefore maybe marketing is the issue, having the wherewithal to say, okay, is there someone in this organization who really understands marketing and who's the best in the world at it? If you can take that challenge, you'll typically find, no, we don't. Okay, let's go find that person. And that can be the difference between scaling and not scaling.
That makes perfect sense. And as being an investor, so you invest in entrepreneurs, correct?
Yes.
I just want to make sure I had that right. What are there things you look for in an entrepreneur? Are there traits? Is it the business? I'm assuming the idea plays a role also too. But I always heard the story, like an investor will always look at, there's the idea, but then they're also investing in the person. Are there traits or things you look for in an entrepreneur that makes you be like, yes, this is worth investing into?
Yeah, absolutely. At Next Coast Ventures, we're very open about it. We're thematic investors, again, headquartered in Austin, Texas. So we're investing in technology companies, but we're typically looking at, first and foremost, you want to understand how big the market is. If you're going to take money from a venture capitalist, the critical question is how big is the market you're addressing? And then the second question is your solution differentiated? Is there some way that you're going to provide more value to the customers? Those are pretty easy to do and can be done in a simple analytical framework. But the real critical, where we spend the bulk of our time, 90% of our time, and probably 90% of our decisions goes around the entrepreneur. And we use this kind of a weird concept, but we call it glass eater. Is she a glass eater? And what we mean by that is within legal and ethical boundaries, because that's an absolute no-fly zone for us. But within those boundaries, will she, as the entrepreneur, do everything she can to make the business successful? And we want our entrepreneurs to have a balance and not be, I don't celebrate entrepreneurs that work 100 hours a week. There is a critical importance to balance. I talk about it in the book, but really it's a mindset. Does she have the passion, the energy, and the drive to take the business to the next level? Because it's really hard. And so to your point, yes, we do. And I think that ends up being 90% of the time, that's why we invest or don't invest, is around the entrepreneur.
I literally thought you were going to give him a cup of glass and be like, "Here you go. Are you a glass eater? Let's go. You got to learn how to chew."
I say, we do give ketchup and mustard, but at the end of the day, and I think the interesting thing about that, Vic, is it's such a visceral, horrible description, but I think it also, anyone who's thinking about going in to start a business, and it can be your own small business or trying to run a large scale business, if you go into it expecting it to be easy, it's going to be a short run and you're going to be massively disappointed. So part of that glass eating is, do you really know what you're getting into? Do you understand that things are going to come at you don't expect? Another one of we've talked about some really great leaders. One of my other favorite quotes is from Mike Tyson, the former heavyweight champion, boxing champion, who said, "Everyone has a plan until you get punched in the mouth," which is probably describes 2020 pretty adept for all of us. But, just something is going to come at you don't expect. And so do you have the wherewithal, the mental toughness, and the, stick-to-itiveness, if you will, to fight through?
Yeah, I think a lot of people got literally hit by Mike Tyson today this year in the mouth.
I think a couple, and then you got up and you thought the fight was over, and then he hit you again. Yeah, it certainly has been a heck of a year.
I'll tell you. But no, I do like the glass eating analogy, because and this is just how my mind goes. It's like one of the things where you're looking like, okay, well, this is it. This is going to be tough. It's going to be hard. Figure out how to get that in without hurting yourself. Figure out how to do it in a certain way where you can, I know I'm getting a little maybe grim for some of the listeners, but it's not going to be. And I was one of the ones that was like, it's easy. We'll figure it out. We'll make it work. And then you hit these walls, and then it was getting more frustration, more aggravation, until I said, you know what, this is going to be a challenge, and I'm going to have to figure this out one way or another. May it be Mike Tyson knocking me on my back, or may it be who knows who, from that matter.
Yeah, and that gets the comparison we talked about earlier, or some of the short form content that makes it seem easy. I give another example in the book about running a marathon. If a friend came to you and said, "Hey, Vic, you want to run a marathon?" You wouldn't say sure and put on your shoes and grab some Gatorade and go run 26 miles. You would probably make it. I don't know what shape you're in, but no one could just jump off the couch and do that. So you would say, no, here's a training program. Here's what you're going to have to do. It's going to be 4 to 5 months, and et cetera, et cetera. I just think in anything in life, having the right mindset and having someone say, here's what it is, and understand it's going to be challenging. That's a much better way to get into something versus assuming it's going to be easy, or that it's going to be all up and to the right, so to speak.
Yeah, I think it's the importance of pre-framing the mind and all that. I think that plays a huge role in all that. Mike, I have one question. Anytime someone writes a book, I like to ask this question if I get the chance. And that is, when you wrote the book, who did you write it for?
Yeah, it's my other joke is, like everything else, if I knew how tough to write a book was, I probably wouldn't have done it. But I personified, I thought about, so I was raised by a single mother. She was a dental hygienist. She remarried. I saw she and my stepfather struggle massively to try and run a business on the side, and candidly just never really be successful. So I really wrote it for that. I wrote it for the person who who was interested in entrepreneurship, didn't have the right framework or mindset to it, in the hope that it would help one person. Literally, I had this one person that said, if you're thinking about entrepreneurship and you've got an idea and you feel like it's your life calling, it's not for everybody, that maybe this book would help you get out of the shower and go pursue your dreams, but do it with the right expectations. That's what I wrote the book for.
I love that. That's awesome. And Mike, really quick, how can people connect with you, follow you, see what you're up to, learn about all that you do, and so much more, and get access to the book too? Sorry. Yeah.
So the book, Mr. Monkey and Me, is available on Amazon primarily. And then for any of my content, it's MikeSmerklo.com. So that's SMERKLO.com. at that website, I've got a bunch of blog posts. I write about the mental aspect of entrepreneurship. There's a quiz you can take, kind of a fun quiz, really simple to see where you are on the mental side of it for entrepreneurship. And then there's a free chapter of the book you can download to see if it's of interest to you. I'd also mention that all the proceeds of the book go to charity, a scholarship set up for students from diverse or underrepresented backgrounds who are interested in entrepreneurship. That's where all the proceeds go. And then my social handle is Mike Smerklo under all the major socials. So
awesome. Listeners, that will all be in the show notes. And Mike, I love how you're helping out individuals to get into entrepreneurship with the proceeds. That's amazing. I may do that on my next book. Now you gave me an idea. I'll pay it forward that way. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you taking space and sharing this wonderful information that you have and all the work that you're doing. And I just appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Vic. Great questions. I really enjoyed it and appreciate your podcast as well. It's really awesome. And thanks for having me.
Thanks, brother.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. For past shows, please visit www.empoweryourreality.com. I hope this show inspired you and added to your life to help you on the journey to rediscover who you really are. To connect with us on Facebook, please visit www.facebook.com/Dr. Vic Manzo. Check us out on Twitter. The handle is Dr. Vic21. Follow us on Instagram, www.instagram.com/Dr. Vic Manzo. If you were inspired by the podcast, pay it forward by sharing it with someone who you know can benefit from it. Thank you again for listening to the Mindful Experiment podcast, sharing paths to help you rediscover your infinite potential.
Now, a word from our sponsor.